Well, hello and welcome to Borders Rugby in Focus, which comes to you today from the Centenary Lounge at Melrose Rugby Club, and it's a referee special with our special guests Ruairidh Campbell and Stephen Turnbull. And of course, our very own Dale Clancy is also here to look back at the weekend just gone and look ahead at the exciting week of rugby, including the FOSROC Super6 final, which is happening on Sunday, involving the Southern Knights. But let's start with you, Stephen. We'll get straight into things with you because you've been a well-known referee on the circuit for a number of years, and you're now one of the senior people, I think it's fair to say, at the Borders Referees Society. And how are things sort of going at the moment? Because it's been well documented that you could do with a lot more.
I think it's fair to say, Stuart, that being frank, we've had some challenges within the Borders with the recruitment of match officials. It's well documented by yourself and by others. And what we're trying to do is think about new ways that we can encourage referees, particularly those ex-players who are coming to the end of their playing career for a variety of reasons, through injury or looking for alternative ways to stay involved in the game. So as a referee society, we're taking a number of actions through engagement with clubs, through engagement with the SRU, and various other things that can try and make refereeing as attractive as possible, because it is essentially the best seat in the house.
How are the other areas of Scotland coping at the moment?
I think we're not unique in the fact that we're facing challenges in the Borders. It's a problem across the country. And I think one of the things we need to do is work together collectively across Scotland to understand what other societies are doing, how we can work together, and how we can learn lessons to shape our response here in the Borders.
And what about your own highlights so far? Because you've had quite a long career. Even though you're so young, you've still had a lot of achievements there.
I've had a really enjoyable career. I've taken some time out of rugby to focus on other things, and I think that's one of the challenges we've had as a result of COVID. People have found other hobbies. However, I'm coming back into the game, and on reflection, I think about the opportunities I've been afforded through refereeing. I came into it as a result of injury. I couldn't play anymore due to too many head knocks, so I had to find a way to stay involved in the game. And starting down here in the Borders with some of the fierce border derbies that we see, and this weekend we'll see more of them coming. And I think for me, my highlight has been assistant referee across Europe, so going away as a team of 3, refereeing some of the highest levels of the game in Scotland as well. So I've had a number of career highlights, if you want to call them then, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity I've had to refereeing. And I think it's important to recognise that those opportunities are there for anybody, regardless of your age, the background you've had in rugby, whether you've been a player or not. But actually, it's one of the best ways to see the game of rugby. You contribute to quite an exhilarating game more often than not. And I think that for me was a really crucial pinpoint in which I decided that refereeing was for me, that I could contribute something back to the game of rugby that's given me so much over the years.
Ruairidh, we always hear no referee, no game, but how critical are we at the moment? What are we at crisis point?
We are certainly close to crisis point at the minute. We're still in a position where we can cover the games happening in the Borders, but what we want to do is build up sort of a pathway for referees, starting from when they're players and then moving forward, so when they cover the youth games and into senior rugby that we have in the Borders and hopefully beyond as well. So what we want to do is build up the reserves and make sure we have enough referees who can cover the games and give everyone the level they should be performing at.
So what is the BRRS doing at the moment to recruit people?
As we prepared for the start of the season, we started a new recruitment campaign. This was focused more on the clubs because we want to encourage ex-players or players coming to the end of their career to take the next step into refereeing. So this targets both mini, junior and senior rugby, and this gives people the right pathway so they can go to the level of rugby that they want to be operating at. So in media, for example, we're trying to highlight all of the benefits that there are for refereeing, particularly in Borders. So the fact that we are still a nice close group, you still get that social element working together, and that refereeing can be a lot of fun if you want to sort of put the commitment in and enjoy it.
So, how successful are you at the moment at getting these players that are coming to the end of their careers, looking for something else to do, but they don't fancy being a referee? How do you actually change their mind?
So we have actually, it's still an early work in progress working with the clubs, but it's just about having honest conversations. As you said yourself, if there's no referee, there's no game. So making players aware of this. And from there, we can start to build, hopefully, that relationship that gives them the opportunity and the clear pathway. As a society, we want to support them every step of the way. So from the moment they choose to do the referee course to the first game, we'll be there to offer coaching and support to make sure that they can fulfil their potential as a referee.
And what's the sort of percentage, would you say, of people who actually try and become a referee and stick at it? Because we have seen a couple of people, try it and say, no, it's not for us, and go away again. What is the kind of the uptake on that?
It'd be hard to put an exact number on it because people get into refereeing or do the referee course for various different reasons. So you've got people joining at 16, 17-year-olds who are there because they want to help out with junior mini rugby. And they might just do that as they continue playing, and that's absolutely fine. But then we also have players who are coming in slightly later. They might do it as part of, for example, PE teaching is quite a common way in, where they're looking to sort of have some element of working with the game, working with youth rugby. Where we are seeing a sort of a lower number of people sticking is those who want to referee week in, week out at a senior level. So that's kind of what we want to be pushing at the minute.
Dale, what's your own experience as a player of referees? Who were your favourites?
Favourites? Ian Herd, I thought he was a very good ref, always spoke very well to the players when you were on the field. He was quite articulate, which was really good. I thought David Changling was a really good referee as well. And he was actually a big part of my kind of rugby career as well. He was my PE teacher at school, gave me loads of good advice, loads of good guidance. He actually tried to get me into refereeing when I finished playing, but I swiftly told him that at that time I wasn't interested because of the nature of the injury that I got. I didn't want to really be running a lot more. I didn't know what kind of level I'd be able to run it. So I think in hindsight, I think it's a great career path for young players. I know that they're speaking, obviously a media campaign targeting some ex-players and people who are maybe at the end of their career, but that probably blankets quite a lot of players. Maybe players who've cut their career early. I was 23-year-old when I finished. Some players maybe go until kind of 35, but there's an opportunity to make a really good career of it. You can see obviously how successful Ruairidh's been as well. Just speaking of him off camera, and there's a lot of young players making a real stamp in the game, being good refs, and I think it's more, in my opinion, it's more fashionable now. It used to be you kept the referee at an arm's length because he was a disciplinarian and whatnot, but I think the nature that I've always had with referees, especially in the Borders, Herdy and Changling being two standouts, you've always had a good rapport with them. You would have a beer with them after, you'd have a chat with them, you'd stop in the street, and that's the sort of thing you feel part of the community. So it's certainly a good opportunity for people to pick up the whistle and contribute back to the game.
And of course national level as well with the Nigel Lowenses and people like that, because it didn't used to happen at all, did it? Even 10 years ago we didn't really know who the referees were, but now with all the coverage that's happening, and we're hearing about Wayne Barnes and we're hearing from Nigel Lowens, and they're becoming, I suppose, more human, if you like, because we're building them into the media.
Yeah, and they're more accessible, and I think that you can even see things like the Lions tour when Nigel Owens was on commentary. You can see how much of an input that referees have on rugby. They're the masters of the laws. They decide what is legal and what is illegal on a rugby field, and I think passing on their knowledge as well to that level is a big contribution to youngsters who are trying to learn the game, get involved in the game. So it's good to get that sort of insight, but it certainly is more fashionable now than it was in the past. I think that if you were coming out of Colts and you maybe want to play senior rugby, seems like from the outside looking in, from speaking to these two guys, there seems like a real good culture and a real good nature of the referees to get involved with, and they can really enhance your kind of your social aspects of your life. To go to Europe and referee in a nice warm country as opposed to in the rain and sleet here in Scotland, it's lifestyle things that you might not get the opportunity to do, and it's certainly good opportunities for people.
So how many yellows and reds did you get in your career?
One.
One red or one yellow?
One yellow, aye.
Really?
One yellow, and it shouldn't have been a yellow. No. It was Kirkcaldy at home. We had a team warning, and then I was offside, I think, and we got a but it wasn't even me. It was shocking. So one yellow card, I think. I might be told differently. I got subbed off by David Changling once for because I was going to get a yellow card, but that was at school, so it doesn't really count. I think I had a bit of respect for referees. I think that you could chat to them quite well and get them on side, and not in a biased, a bribey way, but you could get to know how they were, because you can feed that back to your team as a captain and things like that. You can get a real understanding and a real feel of what they're saying, and they'll give you time. And there's players that have lost the tatty with referees, and there's only one thing that's going to happen. You always get told referees are never going to change their decision, so you just treat them with respect. Call them sir, call them ref, call them whatever, and speak to them, because they're part of the game. You're trying to play rugby and score tries. They're trying to keep order, and they're trying to keep a fast-flowing game. So they've got a job to do. We've got a job to do. And then that was it. I kind of got on well with refs.
I'm going to bring Stephen back just briefly there, because on that point, there are certain players who will kind of nip at the referee's ears all the time, and if the other team aren't doing that, and there's a 50-50 decision that comes, do you give it to the team that's playing ball?
Referees are never biased, Stuart, but I think for referees, 50% is law interpretation and application, and 50% is man management or lady management within the field. Because I think it's important, as Dale alluded to, is to build up that rapport with the players, to set up your stall about how you're going to referee the game, and then ultimately you're going to gain that respect from the players. And hopefully, as the game goes on, you're not going to get the back chat as we talk about often.
Yeah, but you're also human beings, aren't you? And, if people are getting abuse from one team and not the other, I mean, that's got to have some kind of effect, isn't it?
You can get slightly frustrated, but I think it's a way in which you direct that frustration. And I think thinking about the way in which you apply the laws is probably more important than the way that you're going to apply the laws to a particular team, per se.
What a superb answer from Stephen Turnbull there. Very, very politically correct. Well, back to Dale then, because we're going to have a little look at what happened over the weekend. And top of the bill, I suppose you could say, in the Super6 was a magnificent result for Rob Christie's men. The Southern Knights, 36 points to 7 against Stirling County. I think they were 36-0 up, so it was just a consolation by Archie Russell at the end. And, we were all speculating last week at Berwick. Colin Young was saying, what sort of team he would put out. He would personally go for full strength. We were saying maybe, rest a few. In the end, he really swapped it around, gave everyone a chance.
Yeah, I think a lot of the teams in the Super6 did that this weekend. Ayrshire Bulls certainly done that when they got put to the sword against Watsonians as well on Sunday. So there's been a little bit of reshuffling. Their final place was already secure, but I think that bodes really, really well for the Southern Knights. We did say last week, we said if he shuffles the pack and he wins and then he goes on to win, it's the greatest decision that he's ever made. But if he goes in this weekend and he gets beat, then it's a different story. But Ayrshire Bulls were in the same situation. They've came off the back of a heavy defeat as well, so it's going to be a really, really interesting final. Southern Knights just got beat by Ayrshire Bulls last week, so there's a lot to play for. You would say that Southern Knights maybe start marginal favourites off the results last weekend, but it should be a really good final. I'm quite looking forward to seeing how the Southern Knights go.
Let's have a look at the Premiership. Hoyk winning at Aberdeen, a hard place to go. They nilled Aberdeen as well, which was good. They got 24 points, so they didn't quite get the try bonus they were looking at, but they'll certainly be pleased with the first away victory of the season. Jed Forest got a bonus point win, which looked unlikely early on against Musselburgh, but they got it, and that's the main thing. And Selkirk went pretty close, but no cigar against Mar, which was 19 points to 10. So just round up that for us.
Yeah, I think Hoyk, when you look at the league table, they're there or thereabouts now. They needed to start winning away from home, and I think we said the same thing about Jed Forest a couple of weeks ago. Going up to Rubislaw, it's a difficult place to go, but Aberdeen are in horrendous form at the moment, like really bad form. So it was the game that if you could have picked one out, even if Hoyk could say what's your next game, they would probably take Aberdeen away, because they're coming off a good win against Hawks. They really needed to put in a performance away from home to get that first away win, and they'll be chuffed with it. So it puts a little bit of pressure up the top of the table again. Jed starting to build a bit of momentum as well. Musselburgh are always a difficult team, very big pack. They like to kind of rough things up and keep it tight, but Jed are starting to find their feet a little bit, maybe getting a steadier squad as well now, welcoming a few folk back from injury. So it's good to see them get the win in Selkirk finally. I think that was one of those games that you looked at and you would have thought it would be a big walkover for Mar the way that they've been recently, but we did say Mar don't like coming down to the Borders, and Selkirk have obviously made a go of it on Saturday past. It's not good reading if you're a Selkirk fan, because you're down towards the bottom of the league at the moment. But you feel when they bring their players back, and they're still suffering from a lot of injuries, so once they welcome them back, I think they'll start climbing the table and getting results in, and that'll be off the back of a good performance against what is a formidable Mar outfit.
Let's have a look at National 1 then, and Kelso, we all thought were going incredibly well. By half-time they were 20 points to 6 up, 14-point lead against the unbeaten Biggar, and it was still going pretty good for them. In the second half they didn't manage to score, but they did keep Biggar from scoring until, I think, the last 10 minutes when they got 3 tries and ran away with it, 32 points to 20. So they'll definitely say that's another one that's got away for them.
Yeah, I mean, we did to highlight the importance of that game at the start of the week, saying that how big a game that was in National 1. It was the opportunity for Biggar to really keep the other teams at an arm's length, and they've done that. They've managed to put in a good performance in the second half. Kelso are a team now that are competing though, and I think that's something that needs to be stressed. For the last few years they've floated about and they've not really competed. So to be in a position where they can almost beat the league favourites, because you would call Biggar that, it's a good performance for Kelso. Disappointing that they've let it slip, but sometimes these games, especially when you're playing a team in form, they find a way to win, and that's exactly what Biggar done.
Melrose, we thought there was going to be a big score against Cartha Queen's Park. It all pointed that way. Looked as if there was going to be a backlash after their loss at Biggar. As it turned out, I think they were drawing for quite a large amount of the match, and then they pulled away at the end. But again, a bit of a wake-up call for Melrose. Yeah,
they were being defeated for a while in that game. They were behind for a long period and started to come back into it. And eventually, when they did grasp the game by the scruff of the neck, they pulled away. And I think that's, it's a big result for them in terms of, I can't really comment on the performance, didn't see it. I've seen the results come through on social media, but it's a big result for them in terms of Ayr getting beat as well, to push up towards the top and try and put a bit of pressure onto Biggar, because Melrose have beaten Hartree Mill, but Biggar have to go to the Green Yards. So there's still a lot of big games to come up in that league.
If we go into National League 2, Peebles, who took the undefeated record of 2 teams now out of the last 3 weeks, and yet they're still down there in 6th place, having won 4. So it's a very, very tight league, but that was a good result for them on Saturday.
Yeah, it's a really competitive league. And I think, speaking to a couple of the guys as well, again saying that it was a bit of a slow start, but once they got into the game, they really never really lost control of that game against a team who's, Dumfries have been in good form. People's thing now is putting that form on the road, because they've struggled. They've been beaten by Kirkcaldy away from home, and also beaten away from home by GHK, who are, I've seen their team line up. No wonder they're getting beat by GHK, by the way. But it's a thing that people might need to address and get that away from. If they can get that away from, they can creep up that league and compete for promotion. But it's going to be their results and their travels which are going to dictate their season, because the Gites seems to be they were going to a bit of a purple patch at the Gites anyway.
Interesting you mentioned about GHK, because they got beat at Inverleith against Stuart's Melville, but also the interesting part for me is Peebles aren't scoring enough tries to get the bonus points, and there's a big difference there between them and the teams above them.
Story of our life. No, I think that's it's interesting, because that's the way that the try bonuses work. Some teams grind out wins and they can kick penalties. Peebles, we know, have got a good 10. They've got a couple of good kickers in that team that can bang penalties. So sometimes they can work the scoreboard different. It's making sure that they can try and sneak out these extra points. But I think they've got a couple of tries at the weekend. But apart from that, I think maybe 1 try anyway. But then apart from that, they need to start scoring tries. But it's a game you need to win. We all talk about chasing bonus points, but you need to be able to win games first and foremost, and people seem to be doing that at home. So hopefully it's something that they can build on. With Lewis Bertram, they can start getting some tries on the board.
And of course a good win for Berwick against Howe Fife. Really entertaining match.
Yeah, it was a good one. I watched the highlights back, and some good scores, some good rugby, and I think Berwick seemed like they were certainly up for it to make amends for a couple of tight losses in that league. They are certainly putting themselves in a good position, and apart from those 2 away defeats, which were very close, they've got a lot of positives to work on and keep building. We heard last week what they were obviously building towards and what their objectives were for this season, and they're on a good foot. And Howe Fife are a difficult team, they always have been. So to beat them at home is a good result for Berwick.
And into the East League briefly, we've got Duns at home to top club Ross High, 45-12, but they got 12 points against the league leaders, who are doing very, very well. Langholm are still on a roll, unbeaten in their East League 2 campaign in their 150th season. There was no game for Gala IM, no game for Hoyt Lindeen down in the lower divisions as well, but Earlston posted a win against Liberton, 24 points to 10.
The good thing about these Rugby in Focus shows is the fact that you get to go around all the clubs and see where the lie of the land is. Like today, I've learnt a lot more about refs than I'd ever known before I walked through that door. And it was the same at Earlston. You knew about the kind of if you got a plight with players, if you can call it that. They're struggling to attract individuals, and I've said this last week, so I feel like I'm repeating myself. However, when you get these wins and your club's bouncing, everybody's at the bar and they're all having a drink and they're all enjoying themselves, it makes it more attractive to go and play rugby. So if they can get more wins like that, they'll get more people through the door and tying their boots up and going out in the field.
And in the semi-junior leagues, just mention them briefly as well, because there are 3 teams still unbeaten, which are Earlston High School Melrose Wasps, also Kelso Harlequins and Hoyt Youth as well. So 3 teams. Peebles Colts have fallen away at the moment, so I'm sure they'll come back as well. They've got plenty of great players there amongst them. But this far into the season and having 3 unbeaten is quite mouth-watering. And of course, tomorrow, another good match, Kelso Quins against Melrose.
Yeah, I think that it's really good for semi-junior rugby, especially after the big gap that we've had of not playing, to have these teams undefeated, because when you're at that level, Colts, because of all the opportunities that come about with Scotland age grade and your district rugby, it's a good opportunity if your team's undefeated to put yourself in the shop window and put in performances, because really then that's your be all and end all is playing well on a Saturday for your team and playing with your friends, and it sets up a lot of good ties coming up, especially this weekend. Kelso against Melrose should be a good match, because something's then got to go. Melrose beat Peebles a couple of weeks ago to put an end to their undefeated streak. We know what Hoyt's youth system has bled through over the last few years, an abundance of talent, which is now fed into the first team, a lot of local guys there. So, we know what Hoyt can deliver, so it's going to be interesting between Kelso and Melrose.
And a special programme on Saturday, because we'll actually be there on Friday night. You'll be doing the commentary on Kelso Harlequins against, giving its right title, Earlston High School Melrose Wasps. I think we'll probably just call them Wasps in commentary, but again, good to be able to put the focus on semi-junior rugby.
Clubs are not all about the senior players. You need to make sure that the future's bright and promising for players coming through. So to give these guys a little moment in the spotlight, cover their game, it gives me a chance to watch them as well. There could be players in there that are going to be playing for Scotland in 5-10 years time, and you can say I remember seeing them. They played really well at Pointer Park and years ago. So it's a good opportunity for these young guys to get a little chance in the spotlight.
Well, we'll be looking at the upcoming fixtures, including a big day in the Premiership at the end of the show, but we asked people to drop us a line. Let us have some questions that you'd like us to put to our 2 referees today at the programme. So we're going to dip into them right now. I want to say thanks to Andrew Morris, Peter Lowry, Jill Adams, Rory Wilkinson, David Anderson, Scott Banks and Mary Rogerson among those who submitted questions. And let's pile in straight away to Stephen Turnbull and Rory Campbell for your answers, and hopefully we can get through most of them anyway. So we'll start with you, Stephen, and this one which came in: how quickly from starting with the BRRS can people expect to be refereeing, and what is the process?
So the process to becoming a referee is to undertake a level 1 course, which takes place over 2 days. You then join your local society where you're supported with everything from getting a whistle, kit, and of course those infamous red and yellow cards that everybody needs. And then you'll be into a game within a week or so if you're happy to do that. So it can be as quick as a week. And then from there you're going to be coached and supported to undertake the pathway which suits you. So if you are good enough, if you're keen enough, you're eager, then you will move up the ranks and you can ultimately be refereeing at some of the levels that we've talked about throughout this show. Really? So it's pretty quick? It's very quick. And of course, I think you've got to take time to adjust to the game, because every game's going to be different. You're going to get feedback from a coach, a referee coach, so that's going to help you to understand where you can improve in your game and the key things to work on. but ultimately you can be as quick as a week into a game, and then from there develop going forward.
Now, these yellow cards and red cards is a question from me now. Are they actually cards, or are they made of plastic?
They're made of plastic, yeah.
Oh, right. Because sometimes you see referees writing down things. They're not writing on the cards.
You find in football that they have paper on the back of their red and yellow cards where they can write whoever they've sent off or given a caution to. But within rugby, we normally have a pad and a pencil to write down anything that we need to remember after the game.
Here's another one. Why do you think ex-players are reluctant to become referees?
I think there's hesitancy from ex-players or those who are coming towards the end of their playing career who, as you know, we're really keen to support to try and move into a referee pathway, because they probably don't understand what's entailed as being a referee. They've probably experienced different quality and consistency of refereeing across the board. And I think it's about encouraging them to understand what they can offer back to the game. I think if you've played the game of rugby, you have a really key understanding of how the game's played, what to anticipate if you're in a referee's position, and ultimately how you can make the game enjoyable for the players and spectators. So they have a lot to offer, but we just need to encourage them to think about the positives that can stem from refereeing.
A lot of the laws are open to interpretation, particularly at the breakdown. Now, is there a way of simplifying the laws so that they're easy to understand for players and for spectators?
It's a tough one, because you could say that the way that our game is shaped is one of the beauties of it, that it is complex. It does have many interpretations, but that's one of the reasons why we enjoy it. It's a tough one when you are coming into rugby for the first time, because trying to understand it, you can have a vague idea of what's going on. But as you said, someone like the breakdown or the scrum in particular, it's difficult to know exactly what all the sort of the technicalities are. And even when you're involved as a player and then a referee, there's a lot of things you're still learning and still trying to pick up. In terms of laws, so the law book was simplified a few years ago. So this was done to try and make the language easier for anyone to understand. And this did actually slim it down quite a bit. So that should now be more accessible for those who choose to look at it. And then, like you said earlier, in terms of how the media respond and talk about rugby, this can have a great way for helping out. So, as you said, Nigel Owens, the way in Lions games he was able to help explain some decisions, that means we can get across to an audience. And the same with Border Rugby TV, when referees sometimes are able to explain some of the more technical elements of a game. It means that we can get across to the audience and we can hopefully try and get everyone onto the same page.
Now, we see the laws changing all the time. World Rugby, constant reviews, trialling things, etc. As a referee yourself, what would be the one law that you would like to change?
Well, I'm always keen for anything that can help speed up the game. It's something that was mentioned, I think, during the Lions tour, about one way we can, particularly with injuries, we can try and hopefully add some speed. So something I would like to see is kind of what they do in football. If there's sort of a minor injury, for example, a player needs to get strapping, instead of having time off, everyone having to stop and get cold, they go to the side of the pitch, we play on, and when they're ready, when they're finished, they can come back on. Obviously, if it's a serious injury, if it's a head knock, we stop the game. That's something that has to be dealt with. But we could just add a bit more sort of life into the game, particularly in sort of the last 20, 30 minutes. You imagine on like sort of a cold December day, you don't want to be standing around and waiting for time off because you're going to start cramping up and everything. So what we can do just to try and add a bit more speed into the game, I think anything like that's a real positive.
Some good questions coming in here, and of course, inevitably, some about the scrum. And talk about speeding up the game. Mm-hmm. Well, it's about as slow as it's ever been, I think, at the moment. Reset scrums. And I was looking back at some old 1970s footage of Scotland against Wales, and the scrum just came in, and the ball was out within seconds. I remember BBC even putting a clock on the scrummage time at one point, about 2 or 3 years ago, just to draw attention to the fact that, look how much time we're wasting with scrums and reset scrums and more reset scrums. How do we solve that one?
Well, I think the first thing to recognise is that scrums have changed. So when you talk about the 1970s, back then a scrum was a reset. It was a way to get ball back in play. Now scrums are a complete set piece on their own, where teams try to use it to their advantage, where they're looking for penalties or sort of to gain something in the game. So in terms of how we speed it up, it's like everything, it's finding the right balance. You can't rush a scrum, because quite often if you rush it, that's where the issues come in and players aren't in the right position, they're not set. Remember, you're dealing with 16 players and a lot of force coming together, and there's a lot of opportunity for things to go wrong. So it's, when we move forward with scrums, it's about taking our time at setup, making sure we can do what we can to get the players ready as they come together. if there's clear infringements, it's something that's going to be penalised or free kicked. But it's also about having an open dialogue with the players, making sure that we work together to essentially get the right outcome, and that we get an outcome that suits everything that's going around. You are obviously going to get games where scrums are going to dominate for whatever reason, but I think at the minute that's something we just kind of have to live with, and we have to, yeah.
And a lot of spectators will look at scrums collapsing and say, well, how on earth does the referee know who's brought the scrum down and can penalise the other? How do you do that? Because there are dark arts at work in the front row.
Yeah, it's the dark arts, and I won't say I get every single scrum call right, because that's definitely not the case, but we do put a lot of work in, particularly sort of Premiership or Super6, where I'm involved in. We put the effort in to try and do what we can to understand scrums. So as well as watching game footage after matches, doing close reviews, we also work with people who know what they're talking about with scrums, so ex-players and coaches who can really give their insights and try and explain what they see as being sort of the issues, things that need to get dealt with. So it is really a team effort to try and sort of build our understanding and our knowledge of scrums so that we can sort of operate the best we can.
So you're saying at National 1, 2 and 3 it's just a guess then, if you've got a lot of work in it? Super 6 and Premier?
No, it's the National 1 and Premier. Obviously, everyone's going to be do what they can to get scrum set. It's something that's so key in the game as well. I think people understand that you need to have as strong a knowledge as you can.
Yeah.
Because if you start guessing, people know.
Yeah, I've actually been quite impressed with the pace of scrums recently. I watched in Super 6 and there's not been a lot of reset scrums. I think the referees have managed it really well at that level. And I think it's a completely different asset of the game on its own. Like, we always want it to be quick, but we don't always want the quick teams to win. Like, there's other teams have got to use their strengths, so I think it's a great part of the game. And it's just understanding it a little bit more. People just want to see this, French style of rugby. I think the refs are managing the scrum really well in Scotland at the moment anyway. The Lions tour was a bit different, but certainly in Scotland it's been managed quite well, I think.
The first question that came in about scrums was, why is it still law to feed the ball in, supposedly down the centre, and it goes sometimes to the back row and nothing's penalised?
That's the age-old question of what people seem to ask at the scrums. I can remember when I was under 16, when I played scrum half, getting free kicked for it, and thinking, what on earth's happened? Because it's not something you see every day. As a referee, it's still part of the scrum, and to be honest, it's still something that we do try to deal with. But you have to remember everything else that's going on around with, as we talked about, the props and all the force that's going through. So it's something to keep in mind with a referee, that you still want to get it reasonably straight. You don't want it going straight in behind the second row, which I have seen occasionally, and that does get dealt with. But as long as we can get it in a tunnel and hopefully sort of get the scrum moving.
We asked Ruairidh if there was a law he would like to change. What about yourself?
I actually like the laws as they are, then that's a diplomatic answer, but I think one of the ones which I think we've tried to work on is the number of players binding at the back of the ruck, and I think as a spectator it's probably one of the frustrations, because it slows the ball down in the ruck, and that's obviously to get the setup right for the box kick ordinarily. But I think if there was anything I would try and introduce is to try and speed that area of the game up. And World Rugby have obviously brought in the call which the referee makes of use it, and then the team have 5 seconds to use it. And actually, if you look at the likes of Luke Pearce, who is very good at managing that area of the game, and he actually counts down. And that's the kind of approach that is useful in the game to try and speed it up. And as Ruairidh says, that is, as a referee and as World Rugby and across the rugby spectrum, that's what we're trying to do, is try and keep the game fast and enjoyable. Referees
have an opportunity as well, to play a big part in promoting the game.
Absolutely, and I think if we look at the history of Borders referees, and an example, if we look at George Burrell in the 50s, Ian Ramage in the 90s, Malcolm and David Chang-Ling and Andrew McMenemy in the early 2000s, those are just some examples of the referees who have gone onto the international stage, and that is a great way to start promoting refereeing, to start promoting Borders rugby and Borders refereeing. And if we look at the recent examples across Scotland, we've had some names, for example, the Tokyo Olympics. We've talked about Sam Grove-White and Holly Davidson before, Mike Adamson on the international circuit. That is the kind of way that we can start to promote the game, particularly in the Borders, and also promote the idea of refereeing to those within the Border circuit.
Okay, well, here's your opportunity now, with the cameras on you, to promote the game and also sell the idea of becoming a referee. Let's have the glamour side as well, because it can be really glamorous, can't it?
It is glamorous, and I think I mentioned earlier, Stuart, that I've had opportunities to go across Europe, as is Ruairidh and other Borders referees. You know, Borders Society, for example, punches above its weight proportionately across the country in terms of the number of referees who go on to referee at the SRU high performance level and across the Premiership and National Leagues. And I think we've all had the opportunity to then travel across Europe and internationally to experience the game in a different setting, sometimes, as Dale mentioned earlier when we were talking about it, in warm countries. And, you know, for example, I was off in Georgia not that long ago. We celebrated their Christmas and New Year, which was a great experience to be out there refereeing, but also experiencing the culture and the support that people across the world and their passion for rugby.
Young referees coming through then. We spoke to one recently, Doddy Turner, who's doing really, really well. He's enjoying playing his rugby, and he's also doing a bit of refereeing as well, and certainly seems to have got his head completely screwed on in the right way, enjoying it, and a great advert for youngsters coming through as well. Who else have you got coming through that we should be looking out for in months to come?
Well, yep, so young referees is something we've been pushing. Doddy's a brilliant example, and he's also an example that just because you're thinking about refereeing doesn't mean you have to give up playing. So actually we'd kind of encourage it, particularly if you're still able to at that level, that you get the balance right, you get some experience on the fields, which also gives you so much whenever you turn to refereeing as well. So I think they do both complement each other. In terms of referees coming through, we've got the likes of Sean Niven. He's moved up and has done a few National 2 games, so he's on the panel now in Scottish Rugby, so he's really enjoying that level. Got Jed Forest coming through at society level. I think he's got a National 3 game coming up as well, so that'll be his first one in sort of the national setup, so that's really exciting for him. So we do have the referees coming through. We would just obviously love to have a few more as well. Okay, well, this is your opportunity now for the shameless plug. Where can they contact? So the first thing to do is, if you go onto our website, which is borderrefs.co.uk, you can also have a look on social media, where we're at borderrefs on Twitter and Instagram, and that's where you'll see all the information about the society. So it depends really where you want to start. You can get yourself signed up to one of the courses taking place. So there's one in East Lothian coming up in a couple of weeks, for example, and that would be your first pathway. But at the same time, if you just want to have a chat, find out what it's about, just get in contact with the likes of Stephen, who's the current society president. We can give you more information and give you an idea. If you want to meet and have a chat, then that's sort of your perfect first step. Find out what refereeing is about, essentially, see if it's right for you.
We've demonstrated tonight the number of opportunities there are for referees, so I think promoting that ability to be able to experience the game at all levels across the country and internationally, but also to reassure people when they come into the society that they're going to be supported and they're going to be able to develop at the pace they want, wherever they want, and every part of the game as well. So I would absolutely encourage anybody who's considering taking up the whistle to get in touch in the ways that Ruairidh's described, and just have a chat with us. And if you want to know more about refereeing, then we're more than happy to answer any questions. Okay, well, I'd like to thank both of you for coming in today. Anyway, don't go anywhere, because obviously we're going to be looking at the weekend's rugby, in particular the FOSROC final for the Super6, which is going to be happening at the Dam Health Stadium, which is in the shadow of the National Stadium at Murrayfield in Edinburgh, and it's Southern Knights against Airshow Bulls. And earlier in the week, I spoke to Rob Christie and first captain Grant Shields. Now tell us about the last match. Of course, it was a big game against Stirling County. It was the last game of the season, effectively. Some new faces came in as well, but you also kept the old boys in there and swapped it all around, and it worked rather well, 36 points to 7. Always nice to go into a final with that sort of result behind you.
Yeah, definitely. That was a big thing for us. We wanted to go into the final. Having been beat by Ayr the week before, we wanted to get some momentum back on our side. It's great to get the whole season actually completed without any interruptions whatsoever. How much have the boys enjoyed the experience of the Super 6? Well, I think just getting back to rugby full stop after having such a long break it's been good. The boys they've all bought into what we've been trying to do here, and it's paid off. Obviously, we'll be in the final. Now, the results in general have been very, very good indeed throughout the season. It's been very consistent. You've had a few injuries, but you've been able to cover them. Good strength in depth as well. So looking back over the season, you must be pretty happy with the fact that you're top of the table, you're going to the final, everything's looking good. The boys behind the scenes, they've done a great job assembling a good squad. And the boys have done their work off the pitch as well as on the pitch to keep ourselves fit. And it's obviously paid off. Personal highlight for me was that game against Heriot, where we got off to a slow start, but then getting the 3 tries in the last 3 minutes of the game, that was probably a personal highlight for myself.
And of course, one of the highlights for me, I think, looking back, is the penalty try count in your favour. Those driving mauls that work so well. I mean, other clubs do it as well, but Southern Knights seem to have got it completely off pat.
Yeah, now we've got a lot of boys in good positions, which makes it easier for us to do. And you've got Fordy and Lewis, they obviously do their due diligence as well, which makes their life a bit easier. But we know it's not the most exciting rugby to watch for the spectators, but I mean, it's effective and it's helping to win us games, isn't it?
The boys are going to be totally excited for it. So look, it's just making sure that we get this week right and just stay relaxed and enjoy it for what it is. I think, look, the boys have been excellent throughout the whole season so far, so we want to treat it like another game, but ultimately we also know that it's going to be up a level, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be pretty nutritional to start with, especially.
And this time last week, I think just before the game out here against Stirling County, you would have certainly taken 36-7 as a result going into the final.
No, absolutely. We talked about trying to create a bit of momentum going into the final. I think that some boys got opportunities, and the good thing is that they all put a really good performance together, and I think that throughout the whole camp it's really positive. But we also know that this Sunday is going to be a completely different game. Ayr play a certain style that's a little bit different from Stirling. But yeah, no, it was a good performance, and it's hopefully going to lead us into the final well.
You're going in with a win. Ayrshire Bulls going in with a loss against Watsonians. Are you reading much into that?
Absolutely nothing, if I'm being honest. No, look, we were fortunate. We had an extra 2 days on the back of that Stirling game, so a lot of our guys played. I'm pretty sure that it'll be a little bit of a different looking team that will start for Ayrshire Bulls this weekend. So, yeah, look, they know how to prepare for finals as we do.
There was a lot of speculation, of course, before the match against Stirling. Are you going to go full strength? Are you going to rest a few boys? Are you going to mix and match a little bit? But I think you just about got it right, didn't you?
Oh, well, I'm not so sure. Yeah, I listened to your wee podcast, which is excellent, down at Berwick with Colin Young and that, and Colin says, yeah, go full bore. Yeah, look, I think that we're fortunate. Like, our squad's a really rounded squad, and boys deserve opportunities as well, especially not playing rugby for 16 months. So it's been a kind of key. It's been a theme that we've run through the whole campaign. That there's been a lot of changes every single week, and we're fortunate that all the boys have stood up and played really, really well. So that's credit to the players and all the coaches that are involved here. They've prepped the boys really well for all these games. But there's going to be some tough decisions for this Sunday. Unfortunately, for some guys, they'll miss out. But that's the nature of the beast.
But they'll all have a job to do, even if they're off the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's about making sure that the 15 that start and then the 8 that come off the bench are in the best shape possible to put their best foot forward and hopefully put in a really good positive performance, and ultimately it'll be what it'll be.
It's been really good that there's been no interruptions whatsoever. No game has been postponed. It's all run rather smoothly, a complete contrast to what happened a couple of years ago, as we know. And you've been able to, I suppose, to enjoy the tournament as well, more than other clubs, because you've been constantly at the top of the table.
Yeah, it's an interesting word, enjoyment. It's been hard work, absolutely. It's been, look, it has. It's been great fun. And again, we're fortunate here. The players have been excellent. All the other coaches and all the other players from the other teams have obviously done an excellent job as well to make sure that we can get all these games. There has been some games where you're getting phone calls on Fridays and you're thinking, oh no, are we actually going to get there? But yeah, it's taken a lot of hard work, but I think the competition's been played in a really good spirit, and it's produced some really good rugby as well.
What's been the highlight for you?
Playing out here now on a Friday night especially seems to work really well. We're getting some young people down to watch the games, and it's a little bit of a different crowd, which is great. There seems to be some local interest that's slowly gathering, and I suppose ultimately seeing some of the players that have came in that have adjusted to it, that seem to be really enjoying it and playing well. That's probably the most enjoyable thing that I'm seeing just now.
So the final happens on Sunday. And then what happens? Because there's nothing in the diary.
Yeah, look, I think that we're in a really fortunate position here. We've got a squad of players who want to continue with us. And we've got a rough blueprint of where the season's going to start and end moving forward, which will obviously come out in due course to you guys. But I think that it's the competition and the players seem to have been completely bought into, and I think that it's going to go from strength to strength from here, which is great.
Now, something exciting is obviously going to be happening. We don't know what it was. I won't push you on it, but you're fairly confident that we're probably going to get another kind of competition before too long next year.
Yeah, there's obviously some discussions, as I said before, that they're having a look at things. This was very much a kind of 10-game season. I think it's been really exciting. I mean, you only have to look at the top and the bottom of the table. Basically, I think it looked at the Heriot's results. I think if they'd won 2 more games, they would almost be in the final. So the shortened competition definitely sharpens things as coaches and as players, because if you slip up, you could be at the other end, and ultimately, if you take your chances, you're then in a final. So I think it's a really interesting one. I've obviously been used to being involved in the old Premiership, where you've got ultimately 22 to 24 games to eventually get to somewhere, and then maybe have a final or a semi-final and a final. So it's very much a different way, and it's very exciting, you know. So yeah, I quite like the format, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I mean, we do like kind of the summer rugby. I mean, it's certainly, as I said, no postponements at all through weather or any other reasons, which has been great. But some of the players now, I mean, we're going into November next, and then it's December, January, February. Is it a big break for most of the players?
Yeah, again, that'll be a little bit of an individual preference. You know, we've got some guys who, you got to remember, these guys have trained all the way through COVID. You know, it's not like they've just downed tools and done nothing. They've kept themselves motivated. They've kept doing their individual stuff initially. You know, some of these guys were having to do it in their house, in their gardens. So they've been really creative with what they've been doing. So some will need a bit of a rest, I would suggest. And again, some might want to play a little bit of rugby.
Are they allowed to play club rugby from stepping down effectively? Is that okay, or?
Yeah, there's an agreement with the Premiership, if you're a contracted Super6 player, that you can play down in the Premiership through a pool system. So that's something that players can look at. It might be that some players want to travel a little bit and potentially go and play somewhere else to then come back. So look, there's loads of opportunities, but ultimately players want to play rugby. You know, they need games. Some of them do need games, but then, as I said, some of them might need a rest as well. And you know, it's been full on. You know, we've been doing. You know, that first 5 weeks of games was really full on for us. We were training most weeks 3 times a week as a group, plus your games. You know, it was a lot of time and effort put in by these players to get to where they've got to. So, you know, some have got families, so they might want to spend a little bit more time with them.
Personally, I will stick my neck out and say it's going to be a Southern Knights win by probably more than 10 points. The 3G pitch will certainly suit them better than Airshow Bulls, and the fact that they've beaten Airshow Bulls twice this season as well, including the warm-up match, I think they've just about got enough in the tank to pull off the championship. What about you?
Yeah, I think that it's difficult to gauge because of the result up in Ayr the previous week when the Southern Knights got beat by Ayrshire Bulls. Horrendous conditions. It might be completely different this weekend, but it's a final, and it's one of those things that is, you know, as well as the Southern Knights have played to finish top of the league in the normal round of fixtures, it all comes down to this final, and the pressure's going to be on. But they've got a lot of players there that, you know, have played in big games. So have Ayrshire Bulls. They've got a lot of, you know, seasoned campaigners in their squad. But you look at the likes of, you know, Grant Shields has been at Melrose for a few years now, obviously leading the team. He's got a lot of experience. They've got Anderson in the front row as well. You know, they've got the likes of you've got the likes of Godsmark and Picure in the backs. That
Jacob Henry, of course.
Yeah, Jacob Henry has been playing really well recently. You know, they've got a lot of good players. I really do hope that, obviously, the Southern Knights win. But it's going to be a really interesting final. It's going to be a really competitive battle. It's such a good level of rugby as well. So hopefully the Southern Knights can win and pick up the championship.
So it's all kicking off at 1:30 on Sunday at the Dam Health Stadium in the shadows of Murrayfield Stadium in Edinburgh. We wish them obviously all the best of luck. But locally, the Premiership, we have some tasty games as well. We've got Hoyk against Jed Forest at Mansfield Park, a real tasty border derby.
Yeah, I think that's it's going to be a really good game. I think Hoyk play some nice attractive rugby. They've got a big pack, but they do like to spread the ball wide. I mean, know what Jed have got in behind the scrum. They've got an abundance of talent in behind that scrum. As long as their scrum's ticking, they've got a lot of good players. I've seen Gregor Law was coming back as well. I think he's a phenomenal player. They've got the likes of Robbie Shearer-Gibb coming back into the squad as well. So, you know, Jed are starting to get the players back, and these are the players that will scare Hoyk a little bit. Some of the players they'd rather play a team without the likes of Gregor Law and Robbie Shearer-Gibb and the Youngs and Nick Stingle. A lot of good talented players that we've seen over the last few years in Borders Rugby. So, but Hoyk got momentum on their side. Good away win against Aberdeen. They're sitting prettier in the table than what Jed are. So a lot to play for both teams. Jed will be wanting to try and claw their way back up the table in the Premiership, and Hoyk will be wanting to keep some pressure on. So a lot to play for at Mansfield Park.
Well, you're commentating on that one along with Graham Hogg, which will be very interesting, and Kelly Mitchell as well, representing the referees, obviously a former referee herself, and knows the laws of the game as well. So any prediction at this stage?
No, I've got to be impartial. I think I'm really looking forward to it, if I'm being honest. I'm really looking forward to seeing a good border derby. Hopefully the weather isn't as wet as it has been over the last few days, and we can see a nice open competitive game, because I feel that the level at Premiership in that one has been pretty good. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to a good game. I'm not going to put a prediction on it at all. I just want to see a good competitive game, and I'm going to stay impartial.
That's the very first time you've never predicted. Interesting. Selkirk against Edinburgh Accies.
Oh, Edinburgh Accies will win that. No, Edinburgh Accies have been in good form, but I think as Selkirk start to welcome more of their players back, we'll see more of the team that I've certainly grown to know over the last kind of 5-6 years watching them. They've been such a good club team. Like, I've really enjoyed watching them play rugby, and I even think back to that game before COVID where they played Hoyk, and I think it was a draw in the end, but they played some of the most attractive rugby. Out of the two teams, Selkirk were playing really, really good rugby, and once they welcome all these players back that they've been missing, I feel like they'll bring that back again. But it's a big ask against Edinburgh Accies, because they've been in some good form recently. So it's certainly going to be an interesting game, but I'll be hoping that Selkirk will pull through in that one. But it's going to be a hard one for them.
National 1, Highland against Melrose, Kelso versus Heriots, and Gala against Watsonians.
A lot of good games. I'm really enjoying the way Kelso are portraying themselves this year. I've really enjoyed watching them, especially in that Gala game, and going down to the club and seeing the youth system. So I really hope they do start keep the momentum going and keep pressure up the top of the table. But they've obviously all the teams, all those teams, Melrose, Kelso, Gala, I've still got a lot to play for in this league, and it's got a long way to go in this campaign. So certainly a win for all of them would put pressure up the top of the table, because even the Ayr result at Heriots at Goldenacre last week, that was in my eyes a surprise, because Ayr were going into that favourites, and Heriots beat them. So it certainly puts the cat amongst the pigeons in that league.
Very difficult place to go, Highland, of course, and that's a potential banana skin for Melrose, but they'll have their heads screwed on after 2 tough games.
Yeah, I think Highland have got Ross Thompson as well, playing Colin Thompson's son from Peebles. So there's a little Borders connection in there. But Ian Chisholm's been up there. It's certainly been a club over the last few seasons that's grown and developed. We've seen it with clubs like Howe Fife, Mar, these clubs that have been kind of floating down the bottom of the national leagues, all of a sudden just spring up and start surging up and get that talent. So difficult place to go, and certainly it's Melrose will have a hard game up there. But again, they're winning games. They did get beat by Bigger, but they've got a lot of good form on their side this season so far. You
mentioned Ian Chisholm, of course, now working at Melrose, so he'll be giving a few insights into how to beat Highland, I'm sure.
Yeah, and he's a very intelligent rugby player, coach, mentor for the youngsters when he was up at Highland. So it does help having somebody in the ranks to help kind of form your game plan. I seen he was on the bench last week for Melrose, so he's certainly coming back into playing again. He was a great player when he was, certainly when he was younger. I think even when I was still playing. But he's certainly having somebody in the ranks like that is going to be very beneficial for Melrose.
And the Battle of the Maroons, you can't really see anything else but a home win and 5 points as well against Watsonians.
Yeah, Watsonians this season have been murder. If you look at the league table, down at the bottom, like rooted to the bottom. They've not seemed to really get going in the campaign, and this is one of the games that we spoke about before that Gala were really targeting. They had a nice run of fixtures. Unfortunately for them, the Dundee game got called off, but Watsonians, they'll be looking to really put in a big performance there.
National 2 then, Peebles at Falkirk this week.
Oh, at Falkirk, that changes things. No, this is the sort of game that they need to put in a performance and make sure that they can start building that momentum. We've spoke about that on most teams when we talk about the leagues and look forward to the weekend. Peebles are in a position now that they need to get wins on the road. I know that from speaking to a couple of the guys as well that they're suffering with a lot of injuries, especially in the front row, and they've lost a lot of long-term injuries. So it's going to be really difficult for them. A lot of good players. Neil Hogarth was one. Ryan McConnell, I believe, is another one. It's two big ball carriers, big influences in that squad in terms of experience and leadership. So it's a difficult place to go, Falkirk, but you would be hoping that Peebles would be able to pick up from a good win against Dumfries, because that's a huge win for them, and pick up a win on the road and put some pressure up towards the top of the league.
National 3, Berwick at home again, this time to Ardrossanakis.
Yeah, I would be thinking Berwick will be able to keep pushing on from their win last week against Howe. I think that was a comprehensive performance by them. But watching the highlights back, they'll be disappointed with the 2 games that they have lost, but they really now can't afford to drop any more points and lose games. They need to, if they want to be champions and want to be promoted, they need to keep winning these games. So against Ardrossan, a team that doesn't really travel too well sometimes, so it's certainly a good opportunity to pick up another win.
A great opportunity for Duns to get some points on the board this week as well. They're up against Broughton. Both teams have just won this season, so home advantage. Hopefully Duns will bounce back. Yeah,
they'd certainly be hoping to try and get their a second win of the campaign. It's been unfortunate for them that things have been going the way they have. They've not had as many good performances or good results, but that's the nature of League Rugby. There's always 1 or 2 teams down the bottom that the other teams revel to play against and really look forward to it on the fixture list, and Duns just happen to be that team this season. But it doesn't mean that they're going to give any less effort, and this is a big game for them to play Broughton, and they'll be hoping to make sure that they win that game. Same as we spoke about Jed and Aberdeen the other week there. If you're wanting to get away from the teams at the bottom, you need to beat them and keep them at an arm's length. So a lot of incentive there for Duns.
Big win last week, Langholm 67, North Berwick 17. We understand North Berwick didn't have their full team out and were struggling for numbers, but nonetheless they've had 3 wins this season, so that's a good result. Langholm now take that form on the road and they go to Dunbar.
Yeah, I think Langholm are certainly in good form, and we've spoke about it a few times on this show. If you're winning games, it builds a lot of confidence, and they seem to be travelling well. At home, they're going away from home, they're putting in performances and picking up a lot of good results. So, I'd be predicting that Langholm would get another win on the road. And
I wonder if North Berwick will fall to another Borders team, because they're at home to Hoyt Lindeen.
Yeah, if North Berwick managed to get their squad back together, you'd imagine that they'll be a little bit more competitive than they were against Langholm. But again, Lindeen will be putting, hoping that they can just benefit off a lack of confidence from North Berwick and pick up a win, because Lindeen have been a bit topsy-turvy with their scores and their results so far this season as well. So just getting that consistency in their campaign would be something they'll be looking for from this game.
East League 3, Earlston, who coming off the back of a win last week, but a tough ask at Lismore, who ran Dalkeith really close last week. I think it was 20 points to 7 or something, and Dalkeith, everyone's favourites for going up automatically into East League 2, but that's going to be a tough ask for Earlston.
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult, because obviously Lismore have we were looking at the Dalkeith result, and we're looking at the influence and the results that they've had. They've been in red hot form, obviously missed out unfortunately for promotion a couple of seasons ago, so they've got that little grudge against Scottish rugby perhaps, that they're wanting to try and put that right. So for Lismore to run them close is going to bode them really well. They're going to be coming in with a lot of confidence, so it's going to be a difficult game for Earlston, but hopefully they can build off the confidence of their previous win as well and try and build on it.
Which leaves Gala YM, who didn't have a game last week because of COVID in the camp, and but hopefully that will all be sorted out. They've got a home match against Edinburgh University, who beat Earlston last time out 29-17, but Gala YM, loads and loads of injuries, bad injuries as well, so they're going through the mill at the moment. Let's hope they bounce back.
Yeah, they've obviously they benefit at the moment from having quite a deep squad pool, but obviously they've got a lot of bad injuries in terms of what's went on in the last few weeks with the games that they've had. Edinburgh Uni, the result against Earlston maybe highlights the fact that Gala might start that slight favourites, but it just depends against the personnel who they can get. If they've lost a lot of key players to injury, it might be Edinburgh Uni's day, but I'm sure Gala will be able to get the squad together and make a fist of it.
Plenty of other fixtures this week, of course, in the reserve leagues, East 1 and East 2, and those fixtures on your screen now. Also, of course, a full programme of semi-junior matches, including, we'll give it a plug again, tomorrow night at Poynter Park. It's the Kelso Harlequins against Earlston High School Melrose Wasps, both teams unbeaten. A bit of commentary from you on that one to show on Saturday, and we certainly advise everyone, if you want a good game of rugby tomorrow night and see some of the stars of the future, get down to Poynter Park, because that is going to be a good game. Yeah, definitely. They can put it on mute as well, so they don't have to listen to my commentary. But I'm looking forward to it. I think it's something that there's obviously a little gap there. There's not a lot of nationally. I feel there's not a lot of support and publicity for Colts and semi-junior rugby until it gets to the business end. You see a lot about the cup finals days at Murrayfield and whatnot, but the grassroots stuff is sometimes missed, so I'm quite looking forward to going and seeing that, because we know how successful Melrose have been over the last few years. That comes off of having a good youth system as well, and Kelso seem to have a really good culture at the moment. Like, so we were speaking to Neil Hennigan and Bruce McNeil a couple of weeks ago. It feeds down your club. Your youth teams breed off that as well, so I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be a really good game, and we've already seen in action some of the Melrose Wasps team, and also Kelso Harlequins when they had a good win against Gala Wanderers, and there's some very, very good players there which we're really looking forward to seeing tomorrow. Yeah, I definitely am. I think it's the areas that you get to pinpoint and see who's perhaps to keep an eye out for. It used to be when I first started doing commentary and stuff in Borders Rugby, you'd wait to the sevens and you'd see the 18-year-olds start coming up then, and you would keep them for senior rugby. But it's nice now that we get the opportunity to go and look at these younger players and watch them flourish and see who's to look out for the future. Well, it's going to be a busy weekend. A couple of commentaries for you as well. The semi-junior game, and of course the big derby, Hoyk against Jed Forest. Well, I'd like to thank you, Dale, obviously, and Stephen Turnbull and Ruairidh Campbell for joining us for this week. We'll be back again in 7 days' time. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.